So in the UK, 94% of all revenue made on video games the week GTA 5 came out, was on GTA 5.
We also don't know the extent to which Rockstar will find itself competing with itself. This is something that Nintendo is actually facing as well.
Hello and welcome to the Game Business Show with me, Christopher Dring. We are a new publication all about the business of video games, and we'll offer, to quote the fancy press release that went out yesterday, essential insights, trends and strategic opportunities shaping the future of interactive entertainment. You're listening or watching the show right now, but alternatively you can receive all the key takeaways, quotes and insights by signing up to our newsletter at thegamebusiness.com. So you're listening to the show, and we have two types of show. We have our feature show, which will usually be an interview with a games leader of some description. It might also be a deep dive into an individual topic. But what we're listening to today is our first episode, and it is on our news and analysis show, where we will look at a series of different developments going on in the video game space. If you happen to have ever listened to the GamesIndustry.biz microcast, which I used to co-host, then you'll have some idea of what this show might be like. But there is one key difference. I used to host that podcast with James Batchelor, who was the former editor-in-chief of GamesIndustry.biz. But James has gone and got a job in the industry, working for a publisher, which I'm sure you'll all agree is outrageous. So we set out on a mission to find someone to fill James's shoes, James's very large shoes. And in the end, we couldn't settle on any one person. So we're going to have guest hosts for this part of the show. And the cool thing about that is that not only do I get the chance to work with brilliant journalists and analysts, but hopefully we'll be able to bring on people from different walks of life, different backgrounds, different experiences, different parts of the industry. And if you think that might be one of you, or if that person might be you, or if there's someone you know who you think would be great for this, drop me a line. I'm on chris@thegamebusiness.com. I really do want to hear from you. But for week one, I have a video games media royalty with us, hailing from Kotaku, MTV News, Axios, and now runs GameFile, a video game newsletter you really, really should subscribe to. It's none other than Stephen Totilo. Hello, Stephen. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Chris. It's exciting to be the first.
I know you are. Yeah. It's exciting's the word. I'm also absolutely terrified. But we saw each other last week. I saw you at a Netflix event, and shortly after the GDC Awards. Is that the right way of saying it? Right. How was the show? Did you enjoy it?
My show, yeah, the show was good. It was nice. I've managed to master going to shows and not coming home sick, which is was a challenge for a long time, between getting COVID from recent trade shows, or just like, you keep long hours, you're kind of working from the moment you wake up, you stay out late, schmoozing, networking, whatever. You don't sleep a lot. Well, for me, I guess a weak constitution, but I'm feeling healthy, hale, hearty right now. Things are good. I know that you had a bit of an adventure getting home.
Yes, because obviously we're recording this on Monday. We're launching this show this week, so I was very eager to get home from GDC in a reasonable time. So I actually was going to miss the final day, fly back Thursday. Right. And if you saw the news, Heathrow Airport, London Heathrow, the biggest airport, the most busiest airport in Europe, closed on Friday because of a fire. That fire happened while I was in the air, 5 hours into the flight. I was sort of partly asleep when a big noise came over the tannoy, and I woke up to see loads of people milling about and moving about. Had to turn back, so I got to see the full. I have to say, I was very stressed. I wanted to see my kids. I wanted to get this ready. But my last impromptu day at GDC was spent in a pub with like the heads of Curve and Devolver and Raw Fury and Playstack. Sort of indie development publishing leaders, and there was a lot of gossiping and it sharing, which will inevitably come up at some point. So I actually had quite a lovely final day. I did manage to get a flight home earlier. I had to go via Washington. I did get home in time, and I don't get jet lag coming home. It's only out in the US I get it, so I'm feeling also vibrant and fresh.
So when you're 5 hours into a flight, they don't just land at the nearest airport; they send you back to where you started. That's outrageous.
Well, some places they landed, but I think the thing is with this is that with every flight goes to different locations, and then they need to try and get things back into running order again. Having a plane that needs to be in Heathrow or San Francisco in like Iceland or Paris, and having lots of that stuff, I think became a bit of a nightmare. And I think that's my guess. That's my reading between the lines of trying to get things up and running again. They did get things up and running again. It is now people are still being flown home, but it seems to have recovered from the from the fire. It blew up a substation or something, electricity substation. But yes, I had a good show. What I felt about the show is the mood of the industry really affects me. And when I was at GDC last year, honestly, I felt panicked almost. Like it felt, and whereas this year, I don't want to say optimistic, but there seemed to be an element of clarity about the games market at the minute. At least my vibe I got was people maybe accepting what the reality is and
stages of grief.
Right. Stages of grief. Well, it's not very funny to laugh at, but there's an element of truth to that, right? And
they have a plan, you said.
Yeah, and when people have got a plan, I think people feel a bit better, even if it can be really difficult to be. At least that's the vibe I got from the show. I don't know if you got any positives or. Nah.
I think I saw from some people, a sense of disappointment or frustration where they're at, worry from some. I was speaking to one PR person who they're talking about their clients kind of losing funding and high stress amongst those. And then I spoke to somebody at a publisher, and they said they're doing great because they had a recent hit and they feel flush with cash and things are going well. When I was at DICE, another games industry convention, right, back in February, I was talking to somebody who said that they felt like the industry was at a stage where there's very clear winners and losers, and that might not be what many people in the industry think of. That a lot of people feel like kind of everybody's got to be up or everybody's got to be down, and they feel a little bit of maybe what you were describing, a collective sense of we're all succeeding, or oh no, they're struggling, so we're all struggling. And maybe it sounds more mercenary. I don't think this person meant to sound cruel or heartless, but they were just saying, look, the games industry of 2025 is one where you're going to have winners and you're going to have losers. And it's possible to be succeeding or thriving even when somebody else is struggling. That was technically the case, all along. But they felt like that was a realization that maybe more people would need to come around to. And it sounds like maybe that's part of the reality of it. One more point on that is that I was in the Yerba Buena Park. For those who haven't been to GDC, it's in San Francisco. It's set in the Moscone Convention Center, which has multiple buildings that all kind of surround this one big park. It's quite beautiful green space. And a lot of people will gather and mill about in there. Chris, I don't know if you go to the park very often.
I've never been there before.
Okay.
So this show, though, I was there several times. I actually did a bit of filming there.
You may have seen that there's this new video game union in the United States that just announced its formation during GDC, and they held a rally in there. And so their rally chanting about, we're better together, or weaker divided, or however the chant went, was definitely a verbalization, a vocalization of the frustration of the game worker, right? And so that is, whether you see that as hopeful or a sign of the, a kind of challenge in the industry, that's one thing. Standing right nearby, I was speaking with somebody from a Japanese game studio that's been successful of late, and their sentiment was, hey, I don't really relate to that directly. I understand it, but in my area of the business, things are doing really well. And they weren't, criticizing them, but it was another manifestation of this. Some people may be down while other people are up.
I did a piece last year that got criticized by certain corners of the industry. I'd spoken to a load of investors and game bosses, and they basically said to me, we're looking at 2 years worth of pain. And when I did that piece, there were some people hopeful that GDC 2024 would be a moment the industry sparks back into life again. And there was very much, I was unintentionally pouring cold water on that, but it was turned out to be quite true. But even in that piece, I was saying what other people were saying was that it's not going to go from it's really bad, everything's awful, to suddenly everything's amazing again. There is going to be a journey to that point. And I don't ever think it's never going back to where we were before. But I do think we are seeing that. You're seeing a lot of positive stories amongst all the misery. And of course, the negative stories do go further. So yeah, I think that's sort of what you're saying. GDC seemed quieter. I know the official figures aren't out there. The expo certainly seemed quieter, which isn't surprising to me because people have less money and it's an expensive event to go to. I don't know how you felt about that.
Yeah, in terms of attendees, I ran into students who are often able to go there based on their schools able to send them. Although I imagine I don't know if the school pays for them or how that works, but I ran into students and others, media folks like ourselves who don't necessarily have to pay. I'm on I get in there for free as press, but it's over $1,000, I believe, to go. For a lot of people, there's different tiers of passes, but even just the show floor. I was stunned when I went down the big escalators in Moscone North and then looked over at what I expected to see, a show floor packed with booths, as it has been every year that I can ever remember going to GDC for more than 10 GDCs, and instead much smaller footprint in terms of booths. And you got to think that's one of the money makers for GDC, to be able to rent out floor space. And Epic wasn't there, Unity wasn't there. There were some big players that I'm used to seeing, and I didn't see them.
Is union costs in the US? You don't get this in Europe. Union costs in the US are huge, and it really does. It's ultimately one of the things that killed E3. I didn't say worked on. I've sort of connected to that last E3 that never happened. And somebody on that team told me it was cheaper to book space at E3 than it was to book space at the London show that we run called EGX. It's actually cheaper to book it, but then when you throw in all the additional costs, it becomes much more expensive. And I would be the same for the Moscone. Xsolla booked out basically a building, and it was cheaper to do that than it was to have a booth on the show floor. But I will say this: I think we need to be careful of, and I'm not saying Xsolla. I think Xsolla sponsored the event as well. But I think we have to be careful as an industry not to leech off these events. All of us, if we all do it, the event will go away, and then you end up with nothing. And I also, I know
leeching. What do you mean? How do you mean leech? What are we talking about here?
You have it with you remember when E3, and people started putting on things outside of the show.
Right. I see what you mean.
So they weren't going on the show floor, but they're down the road.
I see what you mean.
Or they were crossing the hotel or whatever.
Right.
A couple of companies, that's a victim of a success thing. Big company, that always happens at events. But if everyone starts doing it, then the event itself dies, and you end up with not the gravity, not the the anchor that actually puts everyone in that space. I'm a bit disappointed Epic wasn't there. I know they're doing their address in June, I think.
And that's the thing is I don't think everybody was. All the absences were explained by people, counting their dollars and pinching their pennies. I think some of it was shifting priorities, and so Epic now wants to put more focus on their event in Orlando, their Unreal Fest. So why then do the State of Unreal at GDC, even though they had been doing it there for years? And to your point, if people all bail, in the case of State of Unreal, that was actually at a peripheral event, but then they would also have a booth location. Union costs may have been a factor in making it more expensive for E3 or GDC, but most of these big companies that have these giant booths, they're not exactly incapable of stomach.
And
higher costs.
I guess if I'm the reason why I'm slightly, if Epic have moved purely to boost their other event up, I do feel that's not very thoughtful of the audience. And this is the thing I always get with stuff like this. If people are having to, if people have less money this year, and they might be choosing, do I go to the Unreal event or the GDC event? They probably ought to feel like they ought to go to both. And that's additional cost. And I had it with E3, and it's a very specific thing to moan about. But when Xbox did that, when Xbox took over the theater, and you had to, the amount of times I was going out of E3, walk across the road, go through security to meet someone at Xbox, and go back out of that building and go back through security to E3. I'm like, just put the booth on in the show, for goodness sake. It's not good for the attendee experience. But anyway,
right. But GDC was, I think it's important to say GDC is a place where tens of thousands of game developers gather. And from my experience, talking to a lot of them, many of them may have been frustrated and I spoke to developers who were laid off, developers who were students who were worried about their job prospects, who are not finding job prospects as they've graduated. Nevertheless, a lot of them are really enthusiastic about making games. And I was at an indie showcases where people were showing really creative stuff. You gather a lot of people who have a passion for making games, and you gather them in one place, and you get a lot of inspiring, just kind of talk and there's just a lot of incredible things that people are talking about, people are showing. And in that sense, even a GDC during cloudier times is one that I think shines through, to be a little corny, I guess.
Yeah. Well, let's move on from GDC, because actually I was reading a great game file analysis of the brand new Assassin's Creed Shadows, which launched last week. I haven't played the game, but you loved it, didn't you, Stephen?
Yes. Love is a strong word beyond my family. I don't know how much I truly want to use it, but I did say it was astounding in the headline. So thank you for the compliments. I've played 51 hours at this point. That means 4 hours since I wrote in my review that I'd played 47. It's impressive. I'm a sucker for Assassin's Creed, though. I like the whole phenomenon of them transporting you to some other time and place in history, and I like how they stitch it all together with this weird sci-fi idea that you're in these machines, taking you back into these places. But yeah, quite fun.
Well, it's a really crucial launch for Ubisoft. Let's not undersell it. It's been a really they're already dealing with difficult. The costs of making games for them is getting so much higher because they have so many staff. But last year they really came off a really rough year. They launched multiple titles, but I'm just thinking top of my head, Skull and Bones. I don't think people were expecting that to be a big hit, and it wasn't. X Defiant started strongly, but I think a load of those people that rushed in day one were Call of Duty players and ended up going back to Call of Duty. So that ultimately fell away too. And the biggest one for me was Star Wars Outlaws, which when it was first revealed Summer Game Fest 2023, or at least when it was shown there, the buzz around it was extremely high. And it was coming out with, the biggest traffic drivers, the biggest social media discussion was around that game. Over the course of the following year, that excitement seemed to fade away. And although I don't think the game was bad. I haven't played it. I just looked at the reviews. It missed quite dramatically. That prompted Ubisoft to delay Assassin's Creed Shadows. And they moved it to February initially and then to March. Assassin's Creed is their big killer IP. So its success is crucial at this point. If Ubisoft, there's lots of discussions around what they're going to do. They're already closing studios. They're cutting things. There's talks of 10-cent money floating around for them. But a lot is hinging on Assassin's Creed Shadows. And the early data, because we're on Monday, the only game came out last week, is actually quite promising. So Ubisoft have shared 2 million players. Ampere Analysis has just sent me an update. Their estimate is 2.7 million players. So that's pretty strong. I mean, I've got the UK data for physical. The reason why people have a go at me a lot by Stephen for saying, why are you obsessed with UK physical game sales? It's not that. It's just that data comes in first.
It's a small island.
Yeah. Well, we are oddly, as a small, but it's quite reflective because of the popularity of consoles in this space. And it's, but it's because the UK physical data comes in first. It's the first thing over the line. So it's the first thing that gets reported on. So when I do report on like European digital data later on, people are bored now. They've moved on. I've given them the UK physical.
You have it for Shadows?
We do have it for Shadows, and it's physical data. So this is really not an indicator of anything. But actually, it's pretty good. So it's not Valhalla numbers. It's actually about 2/3 down on Valhalla. But Valhalla launched at a COVID period. It was a huge physical launch, that game as well. It came out in November.
It's 2/3 of Valhalla, or it's 2/3 down, meaning it's 1/3 of Valhalla.
It's 1/3.
Okay.
But this physical sales.
Yeah, physical. Who buys physical anymore anyway?
But if you compare it to last year's Star Wars Outlaws, Shadows sold more in 3 days, because it's the first 3 days of sales, than Star Wars Outlaws sold in 3 months. UK physical sales. Compared to more recent data, it's similar to Mirage's numbers, which I know Mirage wasn't as more of a spin-off game, but in terms of revenue, it's much higher. You need to remember the costs is significantly strong.
In the States, right? Mirage was 50, I believe, and Shadows is 70. Yeah. Notice the metric players, right? They're not talking about copies sold, because everybody these days has some other way they offer games other than paying for them directly. So part of the story for Ubisoft for Assassin's Creed Shadows is Ubisoft Plus. They have, some people might not even realize this, their own subscription service. And if you spend $18 US a month, you get access to their full premium releases. So they're probably using the phrasing of players reached rather than copies sold, because they're including that. It's a good deal if they are prolific enough to make. I think it's a good deal if you're going to buy more than 2 Ubisoft games a year. Ubisoft's challenge currently, as you alluded to earlier, is whether they can make more than 2 games worth getting a year. And so that's got to be bundled into it. And who knows what percentage that is.
Yeah, I wouldn't imagine it's too high, but then maybe I'm wrong. It's interesting with Ubisoft that process, because you can subscribe for a month. So you can rent the game effectively
Right.
if that's what you want to do. And Ubisoft are kind of okay with it. There was a stat they revealed last year when I spoke to them that 1 in 10 of the people that do that are people that have never played a game in the franchise before. So it does unlock new players for them having that option. But you're right. It's part of that is I keep saying Uplay. It's not. It's Ubisoft Plus, isn't it? Ubisoft Pro.
The Ubisoft Connect, Uplay. I think there's other ones. It does get a bit confusing. Yeah, I mean, they're also just funny in terms of how they talk about their performance of their games. When Valhalla came out, it was like, in math class, they have like word problems and everything. So I'd pulled this up. This was a press release from November 12th, 2020. Ubisoft's Assassin's Creed Valhalla delivers massive day one player engagement. So you expect to get some numbers in here, and here we go. Today, Ubisoft announced exceptional player activity for Assassin's Creed Valhalla, blah, blah, blah. And here we go. Here's a big stat. You ready? The number of active players on launch day for Assassin's Creed Valhalla doubled that of Assassin's Creed Odyssey, a trend that is expected to continue as sales of the new generation of consoles increase. No actual number. No. This is the kind of creative, non-hype hype where non-specific hype, I guess, that game companies have been specializing in for some time. So you obfuscate the numbers, you try to find some relative comparison, and who knows? You can always find something to compare your new game to your old game to and make it sound great.
And obviously, it did $1 billion eventually, which was obviously it's pretty significant numbers. My looking at it, I mean, obviously, I've only got physical data, but Ampere's analysis, Ubisoft's own releases, I think this is probably okay.
For that,
is that enough? That's the question. So, looking at it, it seems to be in line with most Assassin's Creed games. Assassin's Creed is a big hit. I think that oddly, the metric that I'm most impressed by is the Steam reviews, which are positive, very positive, I think, if I read that. And there was, let's be honest, one of the concerns around this game wasn't just the fact that the previous Ubisoft titles last year did so well. There was an awful lot of negativity around the game, which I actually never quite understood, because every time I saw the game, I thought it looked amazing. But obviously there was a bit,
By negativity, do you mean a hate campaign, perhaps?
Yes, I do mean that. I mean a confusing hate campaign against the game. But the thing is, that stuff can really, create an element of toxicity around a title.
Absolutely.
I think Ubisoft perhaps maybe gave it a bit of attention, and they shouldn't have done. I'm looking at the numbers. The numbers, okay, Monday, things can change, but I think these are pretty good numbers. In the UK, physical sales is actually the biggest launch of the year, ahead of Monster Hunter Wilds. So it's obviously, again, when we factor in the wider figures, it certainly hasn't done a Star Wars Outlaws. It hasn't been a big spectacular miss. I think selling millions of units in this market is really difficult.
Right. No, there's I think the big question mark around Star Wars Outlaws is that there is a number of things that might have been the reason for its poor sales performance. One is that there was a negative campaign, social media vibe and buzz around it, hate campaign, if you want to call it. Questions of whether the lead character was attractive enough and other ridiculous things like that. But it also was a game that had a very rough first 3 hours of gameplay, required stealth that was instant fail, and that put off a lot of reviewers. So there was a lot of negativity within the reviews, more lukewarm review scores. And then Star Wars itself is a very divisive franchise, whereas I think even when the game was announced, it would not have been, you would not have expected Star Wars to be as controversial a topic. You would have thought, okay, this is a license to print money. Ubisoft open world design expertise plus Star Wars. Surely that's going to do well. So you had this combination, and any of those or any mix of those, a proportion of those could be the reason that Star Wars Outlaws struggled. I really enjoyed the game, but I also found the beginning quite rough. By contrast, the beginning of Assassin's Creed Shadows is quite strong, and it carries through. And while there are some reviewers who point out some issues with maybe the game goes on a bit too long, there's some activities in it that aren't as interesting. Some people question the dual protagonist design, whether both characters are interesting to play. But ultimately, it's a stronger, more consistent, better designed game with more consistent quality throughout. So they didn't have the drag of negative reviews, possibly pulling them back. And so the campaign against how could there be a black samurai? Oh, this is DEI, the stuff that Elon Musk was pushing of DEI kills art. That stuff was pretty easily exposed as being nonsense, as being irrelevant to the actual game, because people started playing it, and the game immediately explains why there's a black man as a samurai in it. It makes sense. It's actually interesting. and then the quality of the game sustained, so that you have people who are playing it and writing up Steam reviews or other user reviews. I think just recognizing this is a game we enjoy, and so you have this kind of much more positive, I think, sentiment around it. But I mean, Chris, you described it as it's doing okay, and I guess the question, right, is whether an Assassin's Creed game that took this long to make doing okay is really all one Ubisoft.
Yeah, I mean, okay. I do mean okay by their standards. I mean, I think it's okay. I think it's brilliant by most game standards today. Like, sell this many units. So I just think an Assassin's Creed does carry with it a certain level of commercial expectation, and it certainly looks like it's broadly still hitting big numbers. It's just whether or not those numbers are they big enough for Ubisoft.
Right, and like their stock price, I don't think their stock price moved up at all in any significant way. It was pretty flat, even slightly down last week.
They probably need to hear a little bit from Ubisoft on their take of it. Obviously, but we'll hopefully hear something soon. I mean, the other thing about games like this is we live in a market where there's so many games to play, and we've got so many things, and not just games, TV shows, films to watch. We have so much stuff competing over our time. A decent open world game like Star Wars just isn't. It's just not even that is good enough. You need to do something to really entice people across. Well, we talked about Assassin's Creed, and I hope the game continues to do well. Obviously, for the sake of Ubisoft, but also because I hear it's brilliant, and I have a code for it, and I'm looking forward to giving it a go. I'll go back to GDC actually, because while I was at GDC, I don't know if you saw this, Stephen, I don't know if you wrote about it, but the ESA announced, because Ubisoft's part of this, by the way, there's a connective tissue. The ESA announced let me make sure I get the name of this absolutely right. I keep calling it the Accessibility Initiative, isn't it? The Accessible Games Initiative.
There you go.
This is basically a series of tags that developers can use on digital storefronts. They could possibly use it on boxes as well if that's what they want to do, to inform gamers of the accessibility features in their games. And they cover audio input devices, gameplay, and visuals. There's specific tags that can range from like, this game has narrated menus, this game has large subtitles, you can control this game with a mouse, that kind of thing. The goal of the whole initiative was simply to create a common language, because apparently lots of people refer to these things as different things internally and externally, to make it clear that, hey, when we're talking about narrated menu, this is what we mean, so that gamers understand what it is they're getting, so that you don't have gamers with accessibility needs who have bought a game thinking it satisfies those, and it doesn't. Equally, people that are put off from buying a game thinking it doesn't have certain features, and it does. It was actually started off as a partnership between Google and Microsoft, and then very quickly Ubisoft, Nintendo, Sony, EA, and the ESA jumped on board. That means this project was a collaboration between Sony, Nintendo, and Microsoft, and it was fun to see. Sony weren't on the stage, but it was very fun to see Nintendo and Microsoft and those sort of competitors on stage at the event. And afterwards, I had a little chat with David, Ubisoft's director of accessibility, David Tisserand, who I've worked with them before. Ubisoft's actually quite really good with this stuff.
Chris, do we have a clip?
We have a clip. Do you want to see the clip?
Right.
We had this common goal that we absolutely all believed in 100%. So whatever, differences or different opinions or different ways to look at the problem, different perspective, etc., could come up in the conversation, we always went back to those initial meetings where we created the visions, we created what we want to achieve, how we want to achieve it, etc. So, of course, it was 5 years of work, right? So it's not like, it didn't happen overnight. So, of course, through that, we had to be flexible, to be understanding to the others, to take each perspective into account before making a decision. Hence, it took that long, right? But also, that initiative, although it may not look like it at first glance, is really focused on the words we use, the criterias we used, etc. Everything is almost pixel perfect, as we would say in games, right? So, of course, it needed a lot of discussion to make sure that everyone agreed, right? But as we said in the panel today, I think we used those constraints to our advantage. We knew that we had to succeed, and therefore it really made everyone be flexible, be understanding, accept that sometimes maybe their opinion wouldn't be the one that we would use in the end, and we all did that. Everyone was very, very collaborative during that effort.
Yes, that was so. I was asking David there about what it was like working with all of the various different parties in it, and it took 5 years, but there was a determination there. The one thing from that, I don't know if you've got any views on this, Stephen, but the one thing from this that I took away from it was it's a US event project. It's through the ESA. I'd like to see this go global. I think that would be wonderful. I get it, global, different countries have different rules and regulations, but work with the local trade bodies there. I hopefully the ESA will do that, so it's not just for US storefronts.
Yeah, I'll just say I think it's really great that whether it was a decade ago or at some point, it seems like there was a collective understanding that took root within the games industry, as well as in just kind of video game culture, that it is an ultimate social good and it is a good overall for more people to be able to play video games, and for people to not kind of cut that off at, oh, you can't hear, so games aren't for you. You can't see, games aren't for you. You don't have, the same ability to manipulate buttons with your hands or your fingers, then games just aren't for you. And instead, there's been a whole lot of effort by the industry, by advocates who really need to be celebrated for pushing this to the fore, to say, no, games should be able to be playable no matter what limitations you might face in life. And I think that's a really good thing.
Yeah. I'm conscious we're running. I've not even got to the main topic yet. But I'll quickly run through one last topic, because I think we'll be talking about this on various shows going forward. And it's the situation with the tariffs in the US. It's a big topic at the moment going on. There wasn't as many people I don't know if you had this as even at GDC, but there wasn't as many people talking to me about this as I thought there would be. But I did speak to a couple of people that were a little anxious around it. But the anxiety seemed to be around primarily around what it might do to people's ability to spend on luxury items such as video games. I did do a little bit of digging on the impact upon actual what's it going to do to the cost of making these games, distributing these games. And the response I got, this is a quote from somebody, platform holders acted swiftly after the actions of the last Trump administration. And as a result of that, what that person was talking about there is that they basically, a lot of games consoles are made in Vietnam. For instance, there are obviously some chips and costs which might be affected by this. There's raw material challenges. When it comes to games themselves, physical games, if you look at Nintendo Switch, which is the biggest physical games market in Nintendo games, those games are manufactured in Japan, shipped over to whatever country they're shipped over to, and they're boxed and packaged there. In the US, they tend to use, well, it varies from company to company, but they tend to use companies like, I always get it pronounced as Vantiva, used to be Technicolor. So in terms of actually the impact upon it, companies had smart platform holders had a warning around this might happen before, right. And they did do things to mitigate the impact upon cost impact upon their products. That doesn't mean there won't be any, and obviously there is that concern around what it's going to do to the economy. But broadly speaking, when it came to that side of things, the industry is relatively prepared for this. But we will be talking about it more, because
prepared as one can be. You never know which country my president is going to attack.
Yeah, suddenly Japan's next, and Vietnam is next, and yeah.
And I think it'll be impactful when presumably, and actually I don't even know if this will be the case, but you expect that next week when Nintendo does their Switch 2 showcase, they'll announce a launch date and a price? Because if they are to do that, then I think people will begin to process more the impact, the economic impact of buying a Switch 2. And so to your point, whether it's more of the tariffs impacting the economy and people's spending patterns, or if we'll see Nintendo baking in, sort of a tariff-proof price so that it's not going to come into their bottom line. And when we see that price for the Switch 2, which I think for many gamers would be their biggest gaming purchase of the year, that could alter the conversation, or at least heighten this as a sort of an agenda item for a lot of people.
You're assuming there, Stephen, that Rockstar is not going to charge $500 for Grand Theft Auto 6, which they probably could do. Let's segue then into our main topic. This is not particularly timely, but there is a big game coming out this year. You may have heard of it. It's called Grand Theft Auto 6. EA. Last month effectively said, without saying, that if GTA 6 coming at the end of the year may result in Battlefield being pushed out of 2025, their new Battlefield game coming out of 2025 and moving into a different window. So I asked around, I assumed, how's everyone else feeling about this? And the answer is exactly the same. This is a quote from probably one of the biggest. I couldn't get them to go on the record about it, because also some of these games haven't been announced yet. They're talking about, but this is one of the biggest games publishers in the world telling me this. Rockstar Games always suck a lot of money and, more importantly, time out of the market. We don't want to be anywhere near that. We're working up multiple different plans for our title. Another senior executive from a different company, even without GTA, it's immensely difficult to find free time for new games to shine. Time is the real scarcity for us, not money. It's tough out there. Then there was... I spoke to a European head of a AAA publisher. It's all off the record. We don't want to launch just before or just after the game. If it arrives in late October, that means you either have to launch early, which a lot of people seem to be doing with the recent glut of summer release dates, or go later, putting you up against the Black Friday sales, or alternatively, just get out of the year entirely. Now, this is actually causing a bit of havoc because they don't know when Rockstar are going to launch. Right. One of the contingencies they're having to draw up. This again, same European boss. If we move out of 2025, what if Rockstar do too? Will we have to push our game up, or will we have to delay further? It's proving to be very stressful. Now, I don't think any of this doesn't surprise me that everyone's looking to move out of the game, but it isn't just game launches. So if you go to, I asked a bunch of live service game developers, and I got quotes from two, again, off the record, quotes from two live service game developers of top 10 live service games. GTA 6 is basically a huge meteor, and we will stay clear of the blast zone. We will nudge our updates back or forward 3 weeks to avoid it. Of course, the problem is everyone is going to do the same. So 3 to 4 weeks before or after GTA 6, you're going to get a load of live service games they're talking about here, dropping content in what they believe will be the safe zone. It's obviously going to get a little bit messy. So as part of this, I decided, actually, are they right to delay the game? Is this really the smartest move? And well, the answer was yes. The last time a new Grand Theft Auto was released was back in September 2013, which means if you were 18 when you bought GTA 5, you're now 30. 50% of all game revenue made during that month, so September 2023 in the US, was for GTA 5. That's Circana data, or MPD as they were called at the time. That's despite the fact the game only arrived halfway through the month. Now, in the UK, I can get the weekly figures. So in the UK, 94% of all revenue made on video games the week GTA 5 came out, was on GTA 5. The following week, FIFA launched, and it was so it's the big launch 3-week period anyway. FIFA's huge in the UK. It's normally number one. But over the course of those 3 weeks, so that what they call the blast zone, Grand Theft Auto 5 accounted for 2/3 of all games sold in the UK. So you're looking at a absolutely ginormous launch. And so that was GTA 5. That we weren't waiting that long for GTA 5 compared to GTA 4. So there is, you can see from pure numbers that there is going to be a big, scary, it's going to cause a big bit of a moment in the market.
Yes. And as you noted, one of the big questions is, does Rockstar actually ship GTA 6 in late 2025? So I mentioned that I was at the DICE convention in February back in Las Vegas. And so while the DICE convention was happening, Sony aired its State of Play showcase for a lot of the games that were going to be released first and third party on PlayStation through the year. And there was quite the buzz at DICE amongst these industry folks who were there when the event aired, because the Borderlands 4 release date was announced for September 23rd. Borderlands 4, published by the same publisher as Grand Theft Auto 6, that's Take-Two Interactive. And this is the first and only mega game, as far as I know, that has been given a release date for the final several months of the year. And so people took away from that, well, Take-Two isn't going to release two of their big games on top of each other. So if September 23rd is Borderlands 4, then the 2 or 3 weeks in front of it or behind it are going to be safe. You're not going to have to contend with GTA 6 during those weeks. Even September 23rd itself, clearly not the GTA 6 release, because they're not going to put it out the same day, both Borderlands and GTA. So there was this feeling of clarity or enthusiasm that, hey, at least we know a little bit. We've decoded the proposal a little bit, I guess done a little bit of Rise of the Golden Idol logical deduction there to figure out what the GTA 6 launch will happen.
You assume 2K at least have an idea, but I think if that does mean it's 3 weeks later, if it does put it at the end of October, that's a really tough window to launch in, because it means basically it wipes out October, and then the time it comes feels safe to perhaps drop against GTA. You're into Black Friday sales, so you're in a sort of that's assuming that it is 3 weeks before. We are heavily into the speculation territory. One of the other interesting things about it, I do think if it does delay out to 2026, which by the way, everyone at 2025, I think everyone is, that's not what Take-Two is saying is going to happen. I think the only company that really benefits from it, or possibly Nintendo, because they obviously are going to be going hard this Christmas, this Q4, this holiday season, because of their hardware. And the idea that GTA doesn't compete with Nintendo, I think, is not true. I think there will be people, you need to remember that when I was a kid and I used to go, Mum, I want a new games console, and she would buy me one that she thought, she might get me a Nintendo. But nowadays, the parents also want the games console. So when they're talking about people who are spending that money, they will, PlayStation 5, it's going to be a big moment for PlayStation 5, this, and Xbox as well, but mainly PlayStation 5. And so it is therefore you'll see Nintendo Switch launch in a relatively quiet point for the PlayStation Xbox, whereas Switch 2 will launch at a particularly noisy point. So I think that's at least the first holiday will be.
Right.
So,
how much does the perspective Switch 2 game player, you said yes, their parents are going to want their GTA 6 as well, possibly. But if there's any company that makes games that would be relatively non-overlapping with GTA 6, it would be Nintendo. And look, there's another big game that came out in 2013 that has sold tens of billions of copies, and that's Mario Kart 8, which has had an incredible lifespan. And unless Nintendo's doing something really strange, they've already teased the next Mario Kart, which I think is 10, not 9, because I think that Tour on mobile counts as 9. I could be wrong.
I think Home Circuit counts as 10. I think you need to...
Then we're going to take him to 11. So whatever this new one will be, likely will be a launch or launch window title. And so, put GTA up against the new Mario Kart. I don't know. Those are both monsters.
We are assuming GTA isn't coming out on Switch 2, but which is a fun thing. But so I actually did look at overlapping data. You mentioned overlapping data there, and it's actually quite difficult because the people that are playing GTA today are actually online players, I think. So I can use Ampere data here. Again, mentioned Ampere earlier. They're
great.
They've got some, I can see throughout last year what percentage of players played a game who also played GTA in the same month. But because it's GTA in 2024, they don't go back, data doesn't go back to 2013, annoyingly. Because it's GTA players in 20, they're online players. They're kind of different. It's not capturing the full GTA audience. So, and unsurprisingly, the games that cross over most with GTA in 2024 were all live service games. Roblox had an average 22% audience crossover, depending on the month. EA Sports FC had about a 13% audience crossover in September when that game launched. When Call of Duty Black Ops 6 launched, 12.3% of Call of Duty players also played GTA. That's the high crossover numbers. And so big action games, shooter games, not and sports games, mainstream games, lots of crossover. The numbers are much, much lower for single player games. Just 3.1% of Warhammer 40,000 Space Marine 2 players also played GTA Online when Space Marine 2 launched in September last year. Star Wars Outlaws had a slightly higher number at 5.3%, but generally speaking, it's quite low. But again, we're talking about online players here. I don't think that's reflective of who might be buying GTA 6 week one. So data's a little inconclusive there. I did decide to look at the lower end to try to find a game that had very little crossover GTA. And the one I found was Metaphor ReFantazio. 1.3% audience crossover. That's not just Japanese RPGs. Japanese RPGs tend to be a little bit higher, 3%, 4%, like Dragon's Dogma and Final Fantasy. But that game was just 1.3%. And there was also some 4X games I looked at. The release dates were a bit muddy, but they also had quite low crossover. Interestingly, some of the games that had high, I expected to have low crossover, like the Bluey video game, didn't, because I think it was in Game Pass, which was also, which Grand Theft Auto was also in, which meant there was actually quite a high crossover over there. So it's a bit inconclusive, but the problem with, even if your game is like a kids game, a proper kids game aimed at a kid, or a proper nerdy or niche title,
sure,
you're talking about getting coverage. So I asked the sort of press engine that sort of sends out press releases and codes on behalf of games publishers to give me some data about, I wanted to find out, what do big games mean for media coverage? So the firm gave gave us a ranking of the top 10 most covered games during the launch weeks of Elden Ring, Starfield, and Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. I picked those 3 initially.
Okay.
And those games all accounted for over 40% of all the published articles just from those top 10 games. It didn't track every game. In the case of Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom, that number was above 50%. Now, obviously, a lot of that's guides content, but that is what, if you ever speak to the media today, I know we're in the media, but when you talk to big publishers today, they refer to it as moneyballing it or, basically using the data. That's what all the players are Googling. That's what they're all searching. That is what we need to be focusing all of our energies and monies and freelance spend on. The reason why I even looked this up was I'm a fan of, there's some pictures on the wall there, which is from Conker's Bad Fur Day. It's one of my favorite games. And the creator of Conker's Bad Fur Day, a guy called Chris Sievell, called me up when he'd released a game in 2018 called The Tale of Rusty Pup. Now, Rusty Pup came out, nobody covered it. Didn't get anywhere, didn't do anything.
I didn't know about this game, and I like Conker's Bad Fur Day. How did I miss that?
So and it's quite a good game. So he called me up and said, "I would like to do something on it, please, if you're up for it." And I said, "I'd love to talk to you, Chris. That'd be great." And so I said, "What went wrong?" And he said, "I released it next to Red Dead Redemption 2." Now, in his mind, he's not a publisher. His idea was, let's put the game out there because that way it's we could be the alternative game. If you're not interested in that, play our game instead. That was his thinking. But then he couldn't get anyone to cover it. They were all very busy covering Red Dead Redemption 2. So anyway, my concluding point, I guess, is that if you're going to even if you are going to release a game that's completely different, you might find getting cut through share of voice, whatever term you want to use to describe marketing and attention, you might struggle. What if I'm going to be a bit more positive around the impact of GTA? Again, Ampere told me something that I thought was really interesting. Ampere track the stickiness of video games. Okay. And by that, they mean how often a player returns to a game in a given month. So the average GTA 5 / online player comes back to that game 4 to 5 days a month. By comparison, the average Call of Duty player returns 6 to 7 days a month, while Fortnite players are 7 to 8 days a month. If you go to MMOs, the number's much, much higher. Like the amount of people who come back to MMOs is a lot more frequent. Now, that's the average player. So actually, stickiness, Grand Theft Auto is on the lower end of the spectrum here. So in terms of what that means, obviously, we don't know what they're planning with GTA Online this year, if they're planning anything with GTA Online this year. But as a game, as a franchise, players are willing to put that down more than perhaps they are of other live service titles. So for all those players all those live service companies are a bit worried about the impact GTA might have on them. It does seem possible to be able to pull those players back in time. But that's the one positive I'll say about the game. There is opportunity from the perspective of other publishers and developers.
A few thoughts. One, I need to issue a correction. Mario Kart 8 came out in 2014, not 2013. So apologies. But likely these two franchises may clash. They clashed pretty close last time. They might clash more directly this time. So we'll see what happens with that. We're assuming a few things. One, we're assuming that not only will this game be a cultural phenomenon when it comes out, which is not in doubt, but that it will also resonate with players in a great way. Yes. It's hard to imagine the game being bad or being negatively reviewed. Rockstar is also very protective of, even just the review process and do all they can to make sure that reviewers truly understand the quality of their game. So it's hard to imagine a GTA 6 coming out with something less than stellar review scores. But this is also only the second Rockstar game developed, since GTA 5, back in 2013, only Red Dead between that, unless I'm forgetting something. And there's been a lot of changeover in terms of creative leadership, in terms of
no Leslie, no Dan.
That's right. So some of the top people, the game may just have a different flavor. It might necessarily be worse, might even be better than the previous ones, but it might have a different flavor to it that might resonate differently. GTA 5 launched without the online component, which came out a month or so afterward. In this case, GTA 6, we don't know if it'll come out with its online component. And the thing that's really given GTA 5 legs has been the online, which has become a staple of Twitch streaming. We also don't know the extent to which Rockstar will find itself competing with itself. This is something that Nintendo is actually facing as well, in that GTA 5 online is still widely streamed. We assume people will move to the next, but Valve has run into these challenges in different times when trying to move people from one version of Counter-Strike to the next, and it's not always a smooth transition. Nintendo is going to face having a backwards compatible Switch 2 and whether or not they're going to be competing with themselves as well. And so there's a number of X factors in here, which don't necessarily suggest that GTA 6 will flop, but its launch may feel different than GTA 5's. That may create other opportunities for competitors, for counter programming or what have you. Remains to be seen, I think.
And interesting, you brought up Nintendo there. Breath of the Wild, they had a bit of that problem with Tears of the Kingdom, because I think it wasn't long before Breath of the Wild sales started outstripping Tears of the Kingdom again on the sort of quarterly basis. Partly because, yes, Nintendo did have a very big success with Tears of the Kingdom, but ultimately Breath of the Wild was still became the staple sort of online shared game.
The default. Exactly.
I'm very conscious of the time. We are supposed to be trying to keep these short. I've not called it a microcast this time, so I wouldn't get quite so criticised every time we ran over. But I think people are probably right to run away from GTA. But you're right. You might move your game. I remember talking to a Remedy about Alan Wake 2 and about the fact they launched during a busy period for Alan Wake 2. They launched next to Spider-Man and stuff like that. And they said to me, if we decided to push it into February, say, we'd have just gone up against Helldivers instead. So there is, who knows what's a safe
there's
window.
Nowhere to run.
There's
nowhere safe.
There's nowhere to run. Well, that is, thank you, Stephen. I really appreciate your time and joining me on the first ever game business show. I hope you'll rejoin us in the future. Maybe we can talk about other things in the interim. But yes, thank you for joining us.
I would love to. Thank you for having me, and congratulations. You have made your own professional transition, and I'm very excited for everything that you're going to do at the game business. I think you also gave people a great taste of it with the analysis and the reporting that you shared during this show. So I'm really excited to see your version, your own personal GTA 6 as your sequel comes out, and everyone runs from you.
Oh, good. Well, I don't think they'll do that. But anyway, thank you for the kind words. So the game, for everyone listening, thank you for listening as well. The Game Business Show will be back later today, actually, and indeed later in the week with our feature shows. And in one of those feature shows will be a deep dive into the state of video game investment. You'll be able to hear about from game investors on Thursday. In terms of our next news and analysis show, that will take place on Thursday next week as we react to the reveal of Nintendo Switch 2. And so to make sure you don't miss any of this, head to thegamebusiness.com, sign up to our emails, read it there if that's how you like to do things, like the old-fashioned way. Until next time, thank you for tuning in.
I've talked to Roblox studios that are smaller, younger teams that are like super happy with like how they're monetizing and how they're able to support themselves. But on like a venture scale, that's a different question than are you able to like make something that's a hit and, have fun and reinvest back into your studio and make more content and stuff. But then it's like, are you able to earn enough to kind of get either out of Roblox or do something that's really going to be like a big hit the way it would be on like PC or console or something like that? And that's still kind of a question mark. There's a lot that's really interesting about it and exciting, but maybe not particularly from like a VC investable angle.